The story of Rahab is an interesting one for a multitude of reasons, but one of the big things that I notice when I approach this story and when I look and read this story is how it seems to fly in the face of what God has ordered the Israelites to do. So we're in our second week of Joshua, and this, of course, is the book that describes the Israelites leaving the desert after 40 years there and going in and taking the promised land. And they were told by God that they were to go in and wipe out all of the Canaanites, to completely remove them because they were such a wicked nation. The judgment was now being brought upon them, and that the way God was going to do that was with the Israelites themselves. But here we have somebody who's a Canaanite who ends up getting spared. And it goes even beyond that, because as we read in details of this story, Rahab is in every single way what you would not expect of a person to be as a follower of God. She was completely opposite of everything that you would expect a follower of God to be. I mean, first and foremost, she was a Canaanite. She was not Jewish. She was not of that heritage and that background. And then on top of that, she was a prostitute, which was not, and still isn't a occupation that is looked at with a lot of fondness within Christianity or Judaism, and hasn't for the entire history of both religions. So everything about her isn't what you would expect to be, a believer, someone who is faithful to God. And yet here in this passage, she gives one of the stronger testimonies to God. She's somebody who in that culture would have been familiar with all the other gods and goddesses of the Canaanite religion, of which there were many. And yet when she's confronted with these Israelite spies, or she's talking to them, she places a God who they believe in above all of them. When she uses that term that your God is the God of gods of the heavens and as well as the earth below, she's saying that that their God is superior to all the other gods she believes in, and that was a big deal. When I was doing a little bit of research for the back of this. For kind of the background of this, the commentator I was reading from, he talked a little bit about how, there have been scholars who have sort of commented that Rahab being spared, which a little bit of spoilers, but when the Jews take Jericho, she and her family are the sole survivors, that when she was being spared, that it flew in the face of many of the things that God had commanded the Israelites not to do. The big ones being, leaving any Canaanites alive, as well as, taking oaths with them. She makes the spies swear an oath, and they do so. But the commentator kind of made a point here that with this confession, she essentially becomes a believer, she becomes a believer in God, and she becomes a part of their sort of, she kind of becomes grafted into the Israelites, to the Jews themselves, just through this very act. And that does seem to be the case within the entire story, because there's nothing about this that people say, that within the book of Joshua or elsewhere in the Bible, where it's kind of bemoaned that, the spies, they broke the commandment of God to not, swear oaths to non-Jews, and to, and they allowed a Canaanite family to live. There's none of that. In fact, Rahab is one of two non-Jews who are listed in the genealogy of Jesus. So she's a very important individual and is applauded for her faith within this very passage. So the biggest lesson for us to take away from this is that it's not how you look or what your occupation is or what your race is or anything that makes you a follower of God. It's how you act. It's what you believe. It's what you profess to believe and how that you act in that sort of way. That is the big message here with Rahab herself and with the story of her herself, that even though she was a Canaanite, even though she was a prostitute, because she believed in God, she herself and her family were spared. And as long as we follow her example, the same thing can be said about us within our own lives. And with that, I would like to invite you all to join me for our last worship song today.